Hello and welcome to the review and sort of wrap up of season 2 of Better World Leaders. And as always, but normally at the end, but today I'm going to start by thanking you for your time and attention at any point that you've interacted with the Better World Leaders platform. Now, in this episode, essentially what I'm going to do is 4 things. I'm going to review what we've covered in this season. I'm going to reflect on the key learnings, these themes, and essentially the sort of the pathway that you can progress towards being a leader who makes the world better. I'm also going to celebrate and express some gratitude for all of those who have supported and really sort of where the following for the platform has been so far, and really thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that I've received and learned on this journey so far. And finally, a little bit of a pause and a look ahead at what is coming. We've got 4 special episodes between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3, and then what does lie in wait for us in season 3. So this next session will be the review. If you want to skip forward to any of the next 3 sessions after the review, you scroll down to the show notes and there's a timestamp there, so you can hop straight to the learning or the look ahead, or whichever bit is of interest to you. So this is the review section of this episode, where I'd just like to take a few minutes to reflect back on what we've achieved so far in Better World Leaders, what we've discussed, and who we've had those discussions with. So at this point in time, at the end of the second season, we've had 20 guests, and amongst them, they've been some phenomenal conversations. Here, I'm going to focus just on season 2, but I would certainly recommend that if you're new to this platform and you're just coming to Better World Leaders now, or you joined us at any point during the second season, do take some time to look back at episode 10 and then any of the episodes that episode reviewing season 1 guides you towards. In season 2, we've discovered through these 20 guests the 12 guests that we've had in season 2, in fact, that there are so many ways to lead to make the world better. And really just here, a few highlights that have really stood out to me, some salient moments, and really what those that have caused the most reflection and introspection for me, and then I think where I'm seeing the activity and maybe the interest amongst the audience group going as well. So 4 episodes in particular, and therefore 4 conversations, have really stood out. Though the one that I'm going to put my hand up and say this was the most significant one for me was the episode with Leen Goranson on essentially natural systems, natural ways of doing things, and of course of leading. And essentially Leen's provocation and the pivotal moment in the conversation for me, this provocation of hers that we need to do better things, not just do things better. I've read Leen's book, and I really have been reflecting over and over in maybe an innate and an intuitive way of working that I've always lent towards, sometimes maybe even resisted because of other things that I was being provoked to do, or ways of working that I was seeing being successful for others. But when I tried them, ultimately they didn't work for me. But then when I've lent more into, I suppose, what is more intuitive, more a reflection of how I was raised and the environment that nurtured me, and where I have now positioned myself, both from a professional and a personal perspective, I think it's all really coming together, and I'm seeing more and more interest, I think, in understanding our role in nature and our position within it, and how to leverage the natural world around us in a much more sustainable, small s, productive, however many capital letters you need in that, and ultimately successful. This is all about making things better for us, better for our teams, our organizations, our families, our countries, and our planet. And that conversation was the one which for me contained all of that most comprehensively and also precisely. The second one which really stood out for me was the conversation with Michael Bungestanya. And MBS, as he refers to himself and likes to be known, is somebody that I've followed, I've learned a lot from, and I'm still learning from. And it was just such an honor and a pleasure to have that interaction with Michael, and such a deep intellectual and stimulating conversation around some of the key themes that have then resonated with a number of other guests, as well as I'll reflect on in the second section on learning. And finally, 2 episodes that I'm going to combine and really recommend that if this is of interest to you, you tune into both of these, because they stand up perfectly by themselves, but I think in tandem, there's a real amplification of the power and the benefit of these conversations. And that is essentially conversations around purpose and profit with 2 very, very different, but in many ways aligned people, Harvey Penny and Kevin Tan. Both of them entrepreneurial in their own way, both of them young, but also wise beyond their years. And in different ways because of who they are, but in a very similar overall sense, both of those conversations deeply resonated with me as an entrepreneurial business person around how you can really join purpose and profit for maximal benefit to all. That's really a very concise review. I'm not going to go line by line through the episode list. I'd invite you simply to scroll down on your podcast platform to do that. All of the conversations have been of benefit, and I feel deeply honored to have had all of them. But in review, those are my personal recommendations of somewhere to start. I would absolutely recommend that you listen to everything. But if anything that's just landed with you aligns with my views, then there's a few of the episodes just to begin with. Now we'll go on to the next section and talk about what we've learned. So at this point in the podcast, we're going to turn to look at the key emergent themes from this season and essentially reflect on what we can learn, and then talk about what actions we can take now as leaders that want to make the world better. And at this juncture, I just want to share a quote with you, something that I find to be efficiently provoking, and it's from Winston Churchill, dear Winston. And this is what Winston had to say, which is that it's no use simply saying we are doing our best. You have to succeed in doing what is necessary. And I think really above all else, that is essentially what being a better world leader is all about. It is about doing what is necessary, taking the bold steps, making the necessary actions, changes, and really following 2 things that have become emerging themes in this season as they were in last season. Following and hearing the call to purpose, and owning the power and authority that you have as a leader. So just focusing on purpose first. I mean, purpose came right up front in the very first conversation we had in this podcast with Paul Dunn from B1G1. And in this season now, purpose has been almost a constant, but I think it was most specifically referenced and most deeply acknowledged by Kirsten Hunter, the CEO of Future Super, and also then by Harvey Penny and Kevin Tan. And all of these are leaders in business, leading for-profit organizations. And they all essentially had the same experience, a moment of personal confrontation, if you will, but something really deep-seated and individual, a moment of calling that spoke to each of them and said, there is a better way to do things. And there is a way that we must do things if we are going to have the world that we all want to have right now. And Kirsten's and my experience for our kids, and for Harvey and for Kevin, it was for both themselves and for their businesses and for their future families. So really hearing that call of purpose, finding a way to walk that path and follow that road, that is a key theme. And if that's something that you're on a journey that you're following, welcome, you're amongst friends. And if you haven't heard the call yet, there's a number of episodes that I would recommend you can go and do so. Start with Victoria Foster from season 1, or tune into Kirsten Hunter, Kevin or Harvey from this more recent season. And then to power and authority. And I think, this is something which most leaders accept that they have. Some leaders actually go looking for, to have this position of standing and this impact and this influence well beyond the reach and scope outside of this chalk circle that I like to talk around, where you actually can only impact and really control what happens on a chalk circle on the ground around your feet. But some leaders lust after this. Some of the worst leaders, it's really all they want. But some of the best leaders respect the power and authority that they have, and they seek to use it with humility and with tolerance, and to do so for good. And power and authority, that really was the conversation with Michael Bungay-Stanier, or at least a substantial part of it, and also with Brandon Srott, around what can be disruptive influence of authority. And then also with Andrew Haim de Vries, around coming into power and authority really by accepting and acknowledging and owning what you do and don't know. So I think those really were the key emergent themes for me around what leadership is and how leadership can be a force for good or otherwise. And really that puts me in a position of combining these things to come up with a provocation of my own, which essentially is this: that in my view, leaders at all levels, whether you're leading yourself, you're leading a family unit at home, you're leading a team of 3 or a nation of millions, but all leaders have both the opportunity and the obligation to make the world better. We have the opportunity, following our purpose and using leadership skills, capabilities and behaviors. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I think you should be focusing on there as a leadership development guy in a minute. But that's the opportunity. Use what you have. Be a force for good. Be a leader who does the right thing, who stands for making the world better and stands against those that wish to make it worse. But we also have an obligation. We have an obligation because of our power and authority to do that right thing, to take that next step, to keep moving progressively forward. We cannot afford to rest, but we must restore and regenerate. And that's a point in particular we'll focus on soon. So if you're still with me after that little provocation, take a breath. I will. These are some of the key leadership outtakes, actions, development areas, traits, and capabilities that we focused on. We talked at depth or in depth and at length about curiosity, humility, and tolerance. That these are traits. They are developable, but they are quite possibly innate, and that they absolutely resonate with the very best of leadership that we're seeing in the world right now. And really every one of the better world leaders that we have spoken to so far exude all those 3 things in bounds. The next really is a collection of skills. And these have been prevalent, arguably throughout human history and are the reason why we're here. But they are all very much requisite and a kind of a minimum bar for entry for successful leadership right now, especially leadership about making the world better. And that's adaptability, resilience, trust building, and critically sitting with discomfort. So if you're interested in improving your adaptability, have a listen to the conversation with Brandon Srott, an adaptive leadership expert. If you're interested in resilience, I think have a listen to Lean Goranson on natural systems, also Dr. Adam Fraser about the kinds of resilience that we need right now. And arguably you could also draw some lessons from Dr. Tom Allen Livernois, the penultimate conversation to this one, about shocks in life and how to keep moving over them and through them. And trust building, trust is a particular dynamic. We talked about this again with Kirsten Hunter, also with Jen Onjikuru, and I think for me the most sort of really impactful and meaningful conversation around trust was right at the beginning with Zoe Routh and her depiction of those different modes of leadership, and that trust really is kind of the bonding solution that each of them needs to really sort of flow through in order to impact in those different leadership approaches at different times. And trust building, I think, especially where so many of us now are leading our better worlds virtually and running with virtual teams and leading virtual teams. Again, in that conversation with Dr. Tom, we talked about trust as being really the bonding agent for connection and adaptability and innovation and creativity and all of those great and necessary things. So those would be my reflections on the learnings that we've had thus far, both from season 1 and 2, but particularly in season 2. So if you're still with us, if you're holding fast, just hang in there. The next section really is just a bit of a review and a celebration of what we've achieved at Better World Leaders so far, and then we'll move to the look ahead. So thank you for your time and attention so far. We'll be back with you in just a moment. So just before we look forward and look ahead at what is coming, I just wanted to spend a few minutes just really celebrating what we've achieved so far in the first 2 seasons of Better World Leaders and expressing my gratitude. So we launched this podcast having planned it for arguably 2 years. And what I really didn't expect was how well the conversations would flow, who we would be able to bring to you as guests on the show, and really how universally these conversations and this topic has been embraced. So on all of those counts, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate that we've had really marvelous change-making and positive change-making people consistently, week by week. I'm going to celebrate the way that the conversations have sparked debate and activated conversations, and the commentary that I've received back from you. 2 in particular that I won't name here, but one based on the other side of Australia from us here, who sent me a message saying essentially thank you, and I'm looking forward to tuning in for years to come, and that they were grateful for the lessons that they had learned from the conversations so far. And the other similar, a young leader, sort of further afield in the world, but really sort of saying, I'm so glad that I've discovered this right now and that you've brought it to the world, because this is exactly the kind of leadership that I want my life to be about. So I think on those 2 counts, thank you for expressing your gratitude, and I express mine back to you for doing so. And I mean, I know podcasts are universal and eminently accessible, and this is part of the wonder of the world that we do live in. But what I wasn't expecting was to be able to look at what lies in front of me here, which is our sort of population map, and to see that we have listeners, quite likely you right now, yes, in the obvious places like Australia and New Zealand and the USA and the UK, but also right across Europe, France and Belgium and Germany and Poland and Lithuania, and then into Africa in Ghana and Morocco, across the Middle East in Iran, and then into Asia and into Indonesia and China and Japan and recently Malaysia and Thailand. And I look at cities like Brussels and Tehran and Dallas and Antwerp and Croydon and Indore and Airdrie in Canada, and I just am really gladdened that in all of these different places, this same message, the same question, how can leaders make the world better, seems to be resounding. And I'm very, very glad that there are so many of you out there who want to tune into these conversations. And I really do hope that we are doing what we set out to do, which is to provide a learning opportunity so that after each conversation, even this one, there'll be something that you can take away and apply immediately in your day. So we're now progressing into the final session. So just one more very, very brief intermission, and we'll be with you for the final look ahead. Okay, so sneak peek time. What is the plan? What is coming? And what is happening for Better World Leaders as we look forward? into our post-pandemic world, we certainly hope, and into the next calendar year. What is waiting for you, our audience? Well, this is the plan essentially. We are going to stick to our current format, more or less. We are looking at including some collaborative elements with some other podcast platforms that we hope will resonate with you, and we're going to enter into a sort of a co-joined process of cross-pollinating audiences, let's put it that way. Something I hope the natural intelligence researchers amongst you may be interested in. But essentially, I think we've kind of got into the groove with the conversations and the format of them, and the feedback that we get is essentially they work. So we're not going to shake up the shows themselves too much. What we are going to do is we're going to run 2 seasons a year. And we've produced these 2 seasons this year. We're now going to go into an intermission, and then we're going to return with weekly broadcasts from March 2021. In that interval, we're not going to completely disappear. We're going to return to you monthly with a special edition, a conversation specifically around what have we learnt this year, what has the pandemic taught us, what has impressed us in the way that leaders have been making the world better. And then as we cross the new year line, we're going to look forward, and in specials then 2 conversations really sort of saying this is what's coming, and this is what you should be paying attention to, and this is what you should be anticipating and potentially preparing for. In terms of guests, I can't share too much right now, but essentially we are very much curating the very best conversations we can bring to you from this consistent range of interesting people around the world who are doing great things. The guests that we've got confirmed so far, I can't wait to talk to. We've got an impact measurement entrepreneur. We've got let's just call him a renewables talent scout. And we've got executive leaders both in America and in Europe, as well as here in Australia, that all have got real success stories to tell about leading organizations that are all about making the world better. We're also coming back to the not-for-profit world, and we've got some leaders from charities and NGOs. So I hope we'll continue to give you a sort of consistent variance all around the parameters of having a positive impact and being progressive and moving forward. In terms of impact, I've mentioned we have launched this 1,000 Impacts initiative at 4i Leadership, and that is something which is very much driven by our success. And what I would like to do is to invite you in the early part of the new year to participate in that initiative with some specific things, essentially, that we will be developing around the Better World Leaders Hub community that will allow you to participate in that initiative. I myself am committing to a big goal in terms of an endurance type event, making the one motion to improve what we leave behind and the other to make right what lies ahead of us. But I'll disclose much more about that as we move ahead. So that is a brief summation of what lies ahead. Essentially, thank you very much for everything that you have given to me simply by passively participating through your earbuds in what we are doing. There is one request I would make of you. Yes, you can add the comments, you can like the social media posts, you can do all that active stuff. But I'm a great believer in grassroots movements, and in particular the power of a recommendation. And the request that I have for you, which I hope is not an onerous one, but a virtuous one, and it's this. If there's any one person in your life that you love or you care deeply for, and that you believe that their impact as a leader would be benefited by sharing with them just one of the episodes that we've produced thus far and that you've enjoyed and learnt from, and I hope benefited from, then please just do that. Just reach out today to that one person that you love and share with them something that together we can help them make the world better. That is all I ask of you. I hope it's not too much. And now just a final fare thee well, and then we'll see you in the very first Better World Leaders Special Edition coming in November 2020. So here we are, really finally at the resting point for Season 2 of Better World Leaders. As always, thank you eternally and from the bottom of my heart for your time and attention, but more importantly, for what you are doing. Like my friend Brandon Srott says, leadership is a verb. It is a doing thing. It is not your status. It is not your job title. It definitely is not your status, your hierarchy, your authority. That is a means through which you convey your leadership. Leadership is about what you do. And I thank you for what you are doing. I hope what you're already doing through your leadership to make our world better. But I would contend that just by being here, just by spending a few moments, a few minutes, maybe an hour on this platform, listening to this podcast, you are already making a motion towards making our world better. And you have sown that seed. So I'll leave you now to go plant that seed, nurture it, foster it, sustain it, and we'll be back with you soon for more Better World Leaders. You'll find audio and video recordings for this episode, as well as links and related resources mentioned today in the podcast area of 4iLeadership.com/insights. This is the Better World Leaders podcast, brought to you by 4i Leadership.